Welcome, welcome. We have another episode of The Weird Way. This is feeling exciting. I've had a few moments on this podcast where it's felt like a roundabout moment. And why it is today is I'm here with Linzey Beister, and he was actually the first man I did a podcast with in person, and that was about over a year ago. To sit down with you today, brother, is deeply, deeply exciting. I've seen you in the community for a long time. I've felt always that you are a man of integrity and someone I've looked to and has helped guide me. And so it's felt really good to see a man in community who I can look up to and has also saw me and helped support me in seeing my own gifts. And I've felt that from you. And for me, that has been such a beautiful gift. So to have this opportunity to sit down, have this conversation, to share in this moment is a deep gift, brother. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Appreciate you. And it's, I guess, that piece when I think deeply for men's work and as brothers just seeing each other is like, this work is around seeing the gold in each other. And I really see you as a golden man in that sense. And, you know, it's easy to see that. So it's my absolute pleasure to be here, and it was a really good time that I had. I know it's going to be a great day today.
I very much feel that, man. And I really like this idea about seeing the gold in each person and in each man because, you know, for me, a lot of my conditioning was about judgment. Like I got seen to see the worst in people as like, how could I judge or how could I condemn another person? And it was actually a journey to get to a point where I started being really appreciative of the people in my life. And for me, even that journey of being like, oh, speaking to you right now and saying, I appreciate you, brother. Like in the past, that would have been vulnerable to tell a man, I actually see him. He's someone who's inspired me. And I'm wondering for yourself, like, how has it felt to be able to recognize the gold in others? And have you felt like you've always been able to do that?
I think for me, inside of witnessing the gold is like, it's not something that inherently came to me. It was something that I wanted others to like me, I think, growing up. So there's an element of seeing what I could like in the other person and then having the courage to actually speak to it. Because often at times I was always looking at, and I do this with everyone, I see what I believe is like their potential, and wanting that for them, because I do actually want to see people win. And it's, do I have the courage to actually share it? Because I think that was the biggest difference for me growing up and then becoming the man that I am now is I have the balls to actually admit those things and to speak to it. So, you know, there's definitely an element of just going after that, like being brave enough, having the courage to actually share it rather than just be in competition. You know, coming from a strength and conditioning background and a gym background and a coaching background like that, it was very much, you know, you could see all this potential around you, but you wouldn't dare say it to anyone else because you would only want to do that for your clients or for your closest and nearest and dearest. But to me, it's like sprinkling a bit of that magic on everyone, because how nice does it feel to be acknowledged and to be seen?
I think that's such a beautiful thing. And before we jumped on here, we were having a conversation about also the shadow side of that, where say in a relationship, if it's a friendship or an intimate relationship, there can be these moments where we feel like maybe the other person is loving our potential rather than who we are. So in a situation like that, where it's like, oh, I see potential in someone, I want the best for them. How do we hold that like paradox of I see this potential and I want you to get there, and I also acknowledge where you're at and I can love you where you're at?
Yeah, that is not easy. You know, I was literally talking to a guy today, not a client of mine, just someone that we've been chatting for a while now, just supporting him through a very tricky situation. And it's that frustration of what comes up inside of ourselves. It's like, it doesn't quite add up, this, how I'm being seen and how I feel like I'm outputting right now. And that can be the piece where we don't understand it, we can be in parts. And that's when, you know, the work that I do now with somatic psychotherapy is realizing that we all have a lot of parts, and how can we love and integrate those. But at times it's like, oh, I'm really good here and I'm really failing here. So does that mean that I'm good or bad, you know, or right or wrong? And being in a relationship where you're held to your highest projection a lot of the time can be exhilarating and also just distressing.
I really, really feel that. Like when you're saying that, I feel when I've been held at my highest projection all the time, there has been almost a trauma response that has made me desire that. Like I've wanted to have that external stimulus where it's felt extreme on my system, where it's like I'm either really good or I'm really bad, and my nervous system swings between them two, and it never actually finds a place of security. And that had been a pattern of mine in relationship, where I was like, oh, things are really either really intense or they're really bad. And like for me, it was like getting off on the intensity, because in a way that was what my nervous system adapted to. There was a safety that I was used to from childhood and my trauma and all the things that I experienced when I was young. And then I carried that on into relationship, where I was like, oh, here I am in relationship, and it's the same pattern, because this feels safe even though my nervous system is activated, because I got used to the idea that this was safety, an activated nervous system. So when I had a regulated nervous system, that felt unsafe. And I see this pattern in a lot of people where they continue the same pattern. And there's that journey, and especially being a somatic psychotherapist, I feel like this is a big part of the work that you do to create safety in the body for a person to land.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, acknowledging that, and I guess sometimes resourcing the client or the person with a little bit of just like their own peace inside of their body, their own presence practice, dropping in, going in a little bit deeper, but then also resourcing them with some understanding around like what is the nervous system? What is polyvagal theory? Like what are these aspects of like parasympathetic, all these elements of the nervous system, so we can get to that point of, oh, if I have this understanding that I'm in fight or flight, then if I keep staying in this stressor, I'll eventually end up in freeze and collapse. So it turns out to be the fight, flight, freeze or please that we experience that's essentially overwhelm. And it is overwhelming, but we can also get used to it, you know, and we can get stuck there. That's why you're saying like relationships, although they might not serve us, they feel very comfortable. And there's an element to that. And then moving on from that place, it's like the neuroception of how do I actually perceive this, or could I see it in a new way such that I could have a different experience, and allowing my nervous system to do that. And then obviously lastly, the co-regulation, you know, and co-regulation just being at times like put down. It's almost like we shouldn't want co-regulation. It's like, oh, that's codependency. No, absolutely not. Like having the ability to be around someone that's quite relaxed allows us to be relaxed. You know, we're doing this now. It's like the more relaxed we are before we start, the more open we are, you know, and that creates the same thing inside of relationship. It's how can you create peace in your relationship? How can you be a safe place for your partner, for all their parts, you know, rather than trying to create this challenge with each other or testing him or whatever it is. It's like I see men striving and doing the best when they are supported and appreciated and loved on. That's when I feel like doing my best work, not when I'm feeling the most challenged, the most tested. Like, sure, I can do it. I can force myself, but that puts me in a different state. That puts me in a fight state and not just the rest and digest, peaceful, creative, open, loving, you know, better in bed, better in communication, better in relationship.
There's a book I've read. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but it speaks about the 3 stages of masculinity. The first one is a knight archetype. The second one, the prince, and the third one, the king. And I can recognize in myself where I've been the knight. And this has been what I've recognized as that fight or flight response, where it's like, oh, I need to go out and fight. I need to prove myself. And I see this when people are looking to fight for something. You know, even at the start of my business journey, I was fighting for it. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get out there. I'm swinging my sword and I'm going to get there, because then once I get there, everything's going to be okay. And I'm trying to get somewhere and I'm never actually there because I need to go out and fight again and do something different. Like there was that constant pattern. In relationship, it was the same. I was fighting for it hard and I wanted to get there.
Been there.
Yeah. And like there was this journey where I see so many people in that state, they actually need to put down the sword. And this for me is about the nervous system, realizing we don't need to fight for who we are. There's a letting go of my worth is attached to what I'm creating or what I'm doing. And I just recognize that my worth is innate to who I am.
Yeah.
And then in that state, there's a humbling process. And I've gone through this in the last year where it's like, oh, I'm actually not a knight, but I want to build something. And I need to build from a relaxed state, and it's going to take time. And this is the challenging thing. It doesn't happen instantly now. It's like in a fight, you know, we win and it feels good afterwards. And it's like, yeah, I'm top shit. Maybe there was a big reward for it and that. But when we put down the sword and we start to actually build and like be in that, and that's our daily work of like, this is what I'm doing every day and showing up for, I've found that it's a humbling process because the results aren't as quick. Yet I feel my system relaxed, and it's like this recognition that we are here to build, and that comes from a relaxed place where no longer we're proving ourselves, but if the building is proper, we're building from a place that is in alignment with who we are and what we want to give to the world. And like for me, this is what is required when we actually allow ourselves to relax. And going back, like if we're out building something every day, I know as a man, I don't want to come home and feel like I need to like build something in, like I'm willing to work in my relationship, but I want it to be a collaboration, not a competition.
Yeah.
And I think this is the new iteration of the next cycle for a lot of men of realizing they're here to build. They don't need to fight. They're worthy of being able to be safe and relaxed.
Yeah, and I think too, it's just like, I have compassion for the men that are in that phase of their life, fighting, hustling, pushing, striving, whatever the manager is that they've got, whether it's, the list can go on and on and on, but it's like just knowing that there's that part, and we don't know where our edge is until we hit it, or we get stuck on it for long enough that we just end up burning out. And, you know, it's not to say that we need to or we should, but it's the case where we push ourselves until we hit the wall, so we understand the boundary of where we're at. And even just having compassion for that, not knowing or thinking that it's a failure, but just knowing that's like an inevitable cycle of just like, okay, something needs to die. You know, it's probably my attitude, you know, and all this will that I have for this thing that I'm actually, the more that I'm focused on it and striving for it, the more it actually stops it, the more that it actually closes it down. The bigger the agenda, the more resistance we face in life. And it takes us away from the flow. And I'm not talking about like the floppy feminine flow of like, maybe we'll catch up at some time today to do a podcast. No, it's like this time, this is how we're doing it. But it's the flow of just allowing with ourselves, you know, knowing that there's a natural flow to things.
Yeah, and a natural creation. Like I could be here and be like, okay, this podcast, it needs to have 1 million subscribers in the first year, and I need to push and I need to make it happen. That doesn't feel good. It's not actually what I want this to be. I want to be in the enjoyment of this creation because I actually love doing this. And hey, if this is successful, that's great. If it's not, I'm having a great time doing this conversation. And I think that is a different space to work at. If we're like, cool, I'm going to allow this to emerge from within myself and allow it to be the creation and whatever it wants to be, it changes our dynamic and our relationship to creation.
It does. And that way I think we're coming back to it is, I think we do our best work from that place. as just being in it, being present, and just following what intuitively feels right, and just knowing that we can get it wrong, or we might change our minds. Like, how many times do we change our mind? We're allowed, and often at times we can get wronged for it or shamed for it or whatever it is, but ultimately we're following the thread, we're weaving that magic.
We touched on it a little bit before, and I want to segue back to it because I think this is an important conversation, especially around relationship, because you touched on the idea of codependence or I don't know if you said that, but like I feel that aversion for many people going into a relationship, especially if you've done some self-development or work. It's like, I need to be sovereign and I need to be in my own frame. And yes, and also for me, it's like, oh, I want my relationship to support me and allow me to grow and prosper. And I feel like there's an interconnectedness to that must occur. So how can someone really navigate that and allow that to be true?
I think when you're navigating a relationship, and I'm really fortunate that I sit in circle every week. So I've sat in circle now for 6 years, and there's always a discussion on relationship at some point, nearly every week. And what I've learnt over the years, as being a therapist, but also, being in men's circle, is that it doesn't matter how long you've been in relationship for, you're always learning and you're always growing. And men that have had the longest relationships, as like including myself for 20-year relationship, there's always something to learn. There's always something new, and trying to not rush it or not have it be perfect in the first little bit is like, it's okay. And it's okay to fail in it. It's okay to make mistakes. Like, we're humans, we're complex, we have so much stuff going on, and we're trying to put, like we were talking about as nervous systems, we're trying to put two nervous systems together and like run our businesses and live together or not live together, and how it should look, and societal stuff, and then you add money into the mix, or potential family and kids, and it's wild. So I think maybe just ask me something more specific around it. Maybe I can give you more of an answer, because it's broad.
So I know for myself, when I first entered a relationship, I felt very much like I needed that person to be who I was. Like, there was like a codependency that was unhealthy in that relationship. It was like, I need you. Otherwise, who am I without that? So, and in my current relationship, it feels like, oh, I feel complete and whole as I am. And so for a person to go on that journey of moving from that stage of recognizing that that they need to be whole, but then also I can see the shadow of it's like where I don't need anything. Like, I'm just whole and sovereign and separated from the other person.
Right.
So how could a person, like, if they're in that first stage where it's like, I need you, like there is that enmeshment between parties, go beyond that to a healthy, like, interconnectedness?
Yeah, okay, good. I think there's a few ways that somebody can navigate this, and what I would first speak to is, what's the story about relationship that you have? Like, what is love to you? What does it mean? What does relationship look like to you? What do you want it to look like? And recognizing that, like, being honest, not about what they want, but what do you want? And then I would usually venture back into the early childhood, because our first relationship, I speak for men in that sense, because that's only people that I really work with, is your first relationship is with your mother. So what are you trying to recreate right now with her or not with her, in the sense of, like, is she a ghost figure that you're putting onto your current partner? How are you treating your current partner potentially like your mum, or are you trying to be the partner that she never had, which is the ghost figure, And sometimes I'll go into ghost figures with clients or with men, just so at least they're aware of that playing out. So if you're a little boy and you have a single mom and she doesn't have a very good boyfriend growing up, and you just go, I want to be the man that my mom never had, and this is not always the case, but so often there's an element to that. There's a real desire for the connection to be, I'm going to do better, and then there becomes the striving and the want to show up and the want to take on too much and the don't want to say no and all the ways. And you have that inner child in you, which is one of your parts. And then you have your adult self that's chipping away at his own life, doing his own thing. But then you can switch, it's recognizing that you have these parts. So that's some of the aspects to it. And then it comes down to there's a book I recommend people read for relationship, and it's called Passionate Marriage. And it goes deeply into differentiation, which is kind of speaking to like how you can sort of stay in your own boat. It's like if we're cruising down the river together and the river is love and we're both in our own boats, how do we not jump out of our boat and try and jump in our partners and steer theirs, and vice versa? Like, I don't want my partner to try and jump in my ship and steer mine. It's like, what are you doing with yours? We're already in the river together. We're in this relationship river. We're in it. We're doing it. And we're sort of just like going with each other. It's the beautiful dance. Like, I love being able to watch my partner succeed and do her thing and be there for her and be there for her parts. Like, I love my partner and I love all of her parts as well, because it's just like, that's all of her, whether I choose it or not. If I don't choose it, then there's going to be a problem. So I think it's just recognizing in relationship is like, how is it being modeled to you? How do you perceive it to be? How do you really want it to be? And if it's not the way you want it now, is learning how are you creating it to be not the way you want it to be. And then that way you have control, or at least ownership over making the changes rather than pointing the finger. Because I think that is often the times where couples get really stuck, is it's just like, if only my partner would be X, Y, and Z. And it's a recipe for disaster,
When I look at this, I always consider like the projection of the archetypal mother and father, the god and goddesses that we may project onto our partner or our mothers, that we idolize who they were. And that then one of the original woundings I see is the recognition that our parents weren't those people, and there was a separation that occurred, and we realize maybe we're angry at them for not being the god or goddess. And like, you said something in here that really, really sparked this for me, which was speaking about how you love all the parts of your partner. And I know this is something that is deeply, deeply important for so many men, is to actually come to a place where we can truly embrace all of our partner. Because like I've felt that in relationship where I was like, oh, I could love you if you're like this or like that. And then I'm trying to actually change them rather than accepting them as they are. And I know the more like I'm able to just accept and love them and be like, oh, how cool is it that my partner has that part, and embrace it. It brings more joy and like celebration and aliveness into the relationship. And I'm also aware that that can be a struggle to like allow that in, because there is this projection that they need to be perfect, or I can't see their shadows and they need to be this perfect projection of the archetypal god and goddess. So how does someone really begin to embrace their partner and maybe the sins where they judge or shame, and being like, oh, this is my partner, I can love that?
I would say, and I speak from the aspect of a man, and I always say it, like, if you're doing this work, you're 1% of guys as it is. Like, if you have this awareness already, and the other part of that is how are you doing that for yourself first? So if you're able to discern and understand that you are parts, and you have parts that maybe you don't necessarily like about yourself, the biggest thing here is, and I'm trying to always teach this to men, is it's not about self-improvement. Self-improvement is absolute dog shit. It's about self-acceptance, because as soon as I can accept that part in myself that I don't like, love, or I hide, deny, and repress it, and I let it out, like say you're dark masculine or whatever it is, it's like, yeah, there's a kinky motherfucker in me. Like, I have a bit of a fucking wild side. And then because I'm doing that for myself, in my case, because I'm doing this deep shadow work and, you know, psychotherapy practice and study, it's when I see my partner, it's just a mirror for me. It's just, I love all those parts of her, and I'm able to hold it with compassion because I hold those parts for me with compassion. And it's the way that I navigate it is not thinking that, oh, I shouldn't have to, and it's her responsibility. Like, sure, I can't save you, but I'm here for you, you know? And the more that you show me that part, like say when you're really vulnerable and you say you share with your partner, oh, I'm jealous about this thing or that thing. Once you've actually spoken to it, typically there's a bit of shame after it, or there can be. And then it's like, how do I not then fall into a bit of a shame spiral with my partner? And say, for example, with my partner, she might share something and then feel a bit shameful after. It's just like, I totally have compassion for that because that's the part that you're owning. Like, you're owning it and you're letting me witness you owning that. Fuck yes. Like, how good is that? And that to me is like, there's self-responsibility in that. There's ownership in that. And I honestly believe nothing is sexier in a woman than ownership. And it's something that's drastically missing in our culture at the moment, around the feminine accountability, responsibility for their actions and how they show up. And when a woman can show up with integrity and with accountability and with like that sovereignty and that peace in that, damn, love that.
Oh, I feel that one too. They're like, when I feel someone in truth, like that to me is what it is, ownership. Like, if I fucked up, own the fuck up. If I'm made a mistake, I said something that I didn't mean to do. If I own that, I feel in my power, even if it's something shit. And I believe that in a woman too, when it's like, oh, I'm feeling shy. Like if a woman is feeling shy or she's feeling like vulnerable and she shares that, that is so beautiful. If it's like, I'm feeling shame around like this thing and like that's truth. And I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. I see you. And like, I feel her radiance in that moment. And like, for me, if someone comes back to truth, because I think that's what you're really speaking to, truth there, like presence of truth in a person. It's like, oh, it's a breath of fresh air in the deepest way.
Yeah. And I think that's like, you know, to answer that question, I think just to remind ourselves when we don't like something in our partner, how can that just be a reflection for ourselves, just subtly in that moment, taking that moment of just, how could I love that part? You know, and the deep work that I do around somatic psychotherapy, the style is called Hakomi, is the basis of Hakomi is loving presence. So like, it's a very feminine style of psychotherapy. But if the wording to me, loving presence, is like the deepest masculine part you can play. And the guy that made it or designed Hakomi, Ron Kurtz, love him, he passed away a couple of years ago. He just has this presence about him. So again, coming back to that co-regulation with somebody and the resonance with somebody, if you're in the presence of somebody who's in loving presence, you get to melt. And of course, those parts are going to come up. This is the other thing with a relationship. Relationship are just beautiful aggregators for your stuff to come up. And consequently, the more safe you feel, the more your stuff's going to come up. So, and it's this piece in it as well is organicity, which is one of the principles of Hakomi. And it's just to notice that because we are organisms, we're humans, we heal. You can't fix a human. You fix a fridge. You don't fix a human. Human heals. So it's understanding the very difference. You don't put a fridge and put a Band-Aid on it and wait for it to heal. It doesn't work like that. You actually have to go to work on it and fix the thing. Whereas a human, you cannot do that. So how do you heal? You have acceptance. And one of the best ways to have acceptance is be in loving presence. If you're in loving presence with another for long enough, magic happens.
When you're speaking this, I feel such a reframe of masculinity. Like I see in the world a lot of like men's work or masculinity, there's an outward directions in it. It's like strive and it's a push. Like for me, that comes from the old paradigm. And when I'm here in the love and presence, it feels like an inwards journey of I'm bringing that energy inwards, and it's almost like the implosion instead of the explosion, where I get to meet myself and go inwards and bring that love and presence there. And I know for me, this has been a big practice. Like grief has been one of the catalysts where it's allowed myself to go in and be like, oh, there I am. There I am. Oh, I can soften. And in the softness, I find my power. And it's like, is that true? Can I relax into my power? Does that work? Oh, it does. And this is a reframe that I think is much, much needed in a lot of this work. It's like relaxing inwards.
Yeah, I think, and it flips the paradigm of doing more or striving or trying to optimize or strive and all the things that are typically managers in our lives, like the way that we put ourselves together to avoid pain, essentially. It's just this awareness and self-acceptance of just like, I have these parts. You know, you have an untapped amount of power within you, and it's how can you get those pieces not out of the way, but how can you love them and pull them in rather than trying to cut parts of yourself off. The more we hide, deny, and repress ourselves, the bigger the kink in the hose, you know. And what I'm always trying to do is just like, how can I let men be more of who they are and express that more so? And a lot of the time for me, I use archetypes and a whole bunch of maps because I know that men are very visual. So if I give them a hammer, they can kind of make sense that I need to hit with this, right? And it's like, if I didn't give them tools, it would be very hard for them to grasp, you know? And so I definitely get this as far as, you know, how to work with men, you know. And Connor Beaton talked about it recently, that there's a big lack or something missing in the therapeutic space, largely because it's largely ran by women. And it's not to say it's wrong. It's just that, you know, in one of the studies, it was 80% of men that committed suicide were considered low risk. And they committed suicide. Like they were actually not low risk at all. And it's like there's an awareness piece that I feel like is missing. And this is why, for me, say my cohort that I was in, there was 38 people and only 3 guys, you know. And so as a somatic psychotherapist, it's like knowing that we're hen's teeth, but I know that the work that we do is good. Like in the conscious space, if a man trains women or coaches men and women, usually it's about a 90-10% split. So I know I'm only working with 10% of like the potential amount of people that I could work with. But at the same time, it's so important, the people that I do work with, you know, and I continue to keep going into that and like doubling down on doing this work and giving men I guess, a way out or a way through, I should say, like giving them the tools. So coming back to this piece around archetypes even and giving a map, it's like, how do I map my emotions? How can I give a man a map? You know, knowing Jung's work, and any listeners of mine for any period of time know that I'm really deep in Jung's work of archetypes. And it's the reason why is not because everyone's doing archetypes. I literally use archetypes because it's the 4 key emotions. Joy is the king, warrior is anger, magician is fear, and the lover is grief. So that's why I use them. So I can give men emotional like maturity and emotional intelligence to navigate and direct themselves in their life, of knowing what do I do with that? When I'm in a huge amount of grief, I'm in my lover archetype. What's the key function of the lover? Connection. And you don't know love until you've grieved, until you've lost it a lot of the time. So it's like, what am I losing when I feel this grief? What do I need to let go of? And then what do I need to reconnect to? Oh, now I'm back to center. Now I'm back. I didn't have to get rid of anything. I'm just connecting back to my center. So it's like, oh, cool. Or if a man's in anger, it's like, great. The key, like the warrior is the doer. So it's like, if I'm feeling agitation, if I'm feeling angry about something, it's like, what boundary do I need to put in place? What do I need to do right now that's going to help me? Because all this energy is flowing into my body. It's like an untapped resource, you know. Anger is incredible. And it's, all right, here I am. I'm really clear. Anger gives me clarity, you know. And then from there, I can come back to center. All right, what am I doing here? It's just, again, giving men maps, giving men. And we know that men can read a map well.
Yes, we can. Well, some of us can. If you actually gave me a map and asked me to navigate, like maybe. I'd like to think I'd figure it out, but I also believe I've lost that skill in the new technological age, and that may be saying something about myself. But you give me a map of the psyche, I'm better with that.
Same.
Yeah. And like, because when I think of the psyche and soul, like I think that's what we're exploring when we're exploring our emotions and going within. And like for me, that is an aspect, like that is the feminine. I view that as the feminine, the anima, as Jung would call it. And like for me, there is a limitless depth in there, and it's unknown, it's foreign. And I don't know how to really explore the unknown, like not fully. And what you're speaking to there, I believe, is the idea that, we need tools to navigate the unknown. I know when I've gone into the unknown without a map, I've lost myself. I've ended up in like higher states of consciousness where I thought I was crazy. Like, and it's just like, what do I do here? I don't know how to ground this. I don't know how to bring this like back into myself and create safety. And like these maps, they provide a framework which we can then operate within, a structure to enter the unknown. So it's like, here's a guideline, here's some safety so we can actually begin to venture out into that. Is that how you view it?
Yeah, I'm noticing my body is nodding a lot listening to you. So yes, like there is that. It doesn't need to be scary for men. And I think often at times it's, you know, we can be in the 3D world of just like doing the thing and going to work and the white picket fence and making sure that we have a nice car and we go on holidays for 2 weeks at the end of the year kind of thing. And I think once we do that or strive for that for long enough, then we finally go, what the fuck is this all for, you know? And then what? And, you know, lucky for me, I got introduced into men's work years ago by one of the guys that originally brought the Mankind Project to Australia, Philip Craig. And my love and gratitude for that man. He passed away a few years ago, and he was someone that saw something in me and put me on that path to go and become initiated. And by getting into men's work, it was this part of, I've lost it. What are we on?
You're going on the path of initiation, going into the Mankind Project.
Yep. And where was this? Where were we? You were talking about
going into the feminine, going into the unknown.
Yep.
And exploring the psyche.
Yep. And having, okay.
Having a map.
And that it's scary, right? And I think coming back to this, I'm on it now, is coming back into this was just realizing that there is a bit of a man switch. You know, they talk about it, the 28 to 32 mark in men's lives of just, we've lived long enough for what others expect of us. And then eventually we get to this point of like, what do we want? How do I want to do it? Is this actually it? You know, and it's a bit of we realize we're in the groove. We realize we're a bit stuck, and giving this opportunity to go in, it's like, all right, men are wanting to do something here. And I know this because there's so many of us that are in this space of like, let's say it's the conscious community or whatever it is, but like, not that we're any more conscious than any other community, but it's the whole thing of like striving to know thyself a little bit more and wanting to be able to go in there. And it's, you know, for me, I have I have my own judgments around how to do that. And I see that in men's work. Like we were talking before, how sometimes it's not the thing, but it is the thing. Like, how can we discern? And, you know, like what I found for me is men's work can be very confronting. It's very warrior-like beast work. It's like a blockbuster. It smashes you open. It forces you open. And then I realized for me, it's like, okay, so I can break a man open. You know, you can do that with lots of different processes and rage work and anger work and sadness work and scare him and do all these things that are essentially violent. But to me, it was like, now what? How do I put Humpty Dumpty back together? You know, and that's where this study came in for me. It was like, I need to create something that's also the complete opposite of men's work, but I can bring it to men's work. And that's where I feel like for me, Hakomi has done that. It's given me the tools and resources to be able to fiercely hold a man and then fiercely love a man. You know, and it's the balance of both.
Yeah, holding the polarity so a man can come home, he can know both extremes and he can find himself in the middle.
Yeah, and it's just, I think one of the biggest missing experiences for so many men is having like a grounded, solid, mature, masculine man in the presence of, you know, because for so many of us, we missed that. We had really beautiful fathers that provided for us, that were busy, that were working, that didn't have the ability or had never been modeled or shown love the way that we've learnt it from our generation. You know, like say I'm a millennial and my parents are boomers and then their parents were the silent generation. Like they were the people that grew up in war. Like just to be alive was a gift enough. Do you think your parents got loved on or spoken to them about their emotions or anything like that? It was like you just were surviving. So to have missing experiences for so many men in our generation that had parents that had also missing experiences, we're really like recoursing what it is to be a man and how to show up and how to show up in this way that's loving and that's, you know, strong but yet connected. Yeah. You know, it's like it's a challenge. It hasn't been modeled.
No.
You know?
It is a new way, and like I know for myself, I'm always on the journey of learning what that is. When I sway a little bit, coming back to center as I can, because I know I do get caught still in work, in relationship, in like the doing of life, and I think this, like even just speaking to it, is why I do, is because to know a man, he doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay to sway and then be like, oh, okay, come back now. It's okay, come back. And come home each and every time, and for that sway to get less and less. It's not about always walking the line. It's doing it the best we can in the way that we can, and learning when we don't to come home and remember that that's where we are.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that we have brothers. It's so important that we have other men in our lives that can hold that, and whether it's men that are of all ages, younger, older, different walks of life. That's why I so appreciate being in like a weekly men's circle. Is there's guys in there that are older, there's guys in there that are younger, there's guys that are in the group that make 10 times more than I do, and there's guys in there that make 10 times less than I do, and they just all have different experiences. Some are married, some are not, some are in relationships, some are not. Like some have traveled, some have not. It's just like all that experience, you know, I get to have as a resource just to bounce myself off, you know, and I think that's so important because otherwise, you know, I think the whole lone wolf thing's kind of like definitely not a thing. Maybe it is, but I don't see that as much anymore. It's like, you know, if there's still some wounding around men, then, or they're a serious nice guy, then they might not have any men in their life, but typically, you know, if you're doing this work, you're going to need to have someone that you can bounce off.
Yeah. Like even if it's just like you're doing great, like a celebration of it. Like I know for me that was where I came from, the nice guy, and definitely a lone wolf energy. And it took a lot of work to get to a place where it feels safe to be around men. And it's like, oh, I can share. oh, I'm having a great week, I'm having a shit week. Like either way, it's okay. And to be bounced back, to be just okay in that. And I feel like you're saying that there is a dissolving of the lone wolf, because we're seeing we do better in a pack. We do better in a tribe. We do better when we have the brothers beside us who's willing to lift us up, who's willing to see or call us forward too and be like, hey man, I've noticed this. Are you okay right now? Because that in itself is love and presence.
Yeah, and just like having that ability to do that for each other, regardless of where we're at, like having the safety inside of a group, you know, going back to like the polyvagal theory stuff, it's like that co-regulation of just being able to, it's like, I would really like to see that more, is we're able to call each other out and forward and not just cut people out or cut people off. It's like you have something to give, you know, and often at times, and I speak to men about this all the time, is don't react to the person's reaction. Like give it some time. If you go up to somebody and you give them your truth, you might likely get a reaction from them, like a rejection or a I don't believe that or whatever. Don't engage with that. Just offer your truth or your, like, you know, your reflection, if it's as grounded as it possibly can be, and let them sit on it for a while, you know. And I say this the same in relationship. It's like as soon as one person is triggered, just work on that trigger, because as soon as you're both triggered, it's an argument. It's over. It's absolutely over in that moment. So, you know, and I get that sometimes it's like it's always the same person being triggered first. So what? Like if you really love the person, you're fine to hold that space. You hold to be there with them, knowing that the sooner that those parts are met, loved, and drawn in, the sooner that person's going to be able to hold you back. You know, as in hold space for you back, not actually physically hold you back in life.
I'd love it. Are you able to speak more deeply on polyvagal theory and just share?
I guess it's just, it's giving people more of a map around it. So for me, the way that I think about it as far as healing is concerned is just your ultimate goal. I'll make it just simple. Is like your ultimate goal is to be in rest and digest, you know, parasympathetic, the for you, you know, and it's working for you. So how can you just get yourself into that stage? And the reason why I talk about it, but I try not to go too deep on it, is it's just so fucking confusing. And what I mean by that is if you're in freeze or you're in fawn or collapse, think of it like this. If the stress is, if you're, perfect example, we're sitting here right now, we're doing a podcast, we're in rest and digest, we're pretty chilled. I know I'm pretty relaxed. And then there was a knock at the door, or someone walked past the window here, it'd be like a bit of a shock. So it would be fight or flight would kick in. And then from that stage, it's once we work out what's going on, we would eventually go back to that rest and digest, and we can go back to that parasympathetic nervous system. And then if that walking around happened and then it was a lot of people and it kept happening all the time, that stress, we could end up being stuck there. And then because we can't change it, we change. And this is where the stuckness can become like chronic stress and chronic deregulation, which is why then we collapse or fawn. So an animal in the animal kingdom, if an animal collapses, like a lamb, like goes ding and like freezes and falls over, it's acting dead. So it's bypassed and gone even deeper into dysregulation than fight or flight. And the same thing when it comes to humans. So when I work with a man that's in that state of collapse or fawning, or I call please, because fawn doesn't sound very masculine, so fight, flight, freeze or please, I'm getting into that state in which he feels that way, and then encouraging him to have and follow the impulse to fight, to kick, to punch, or to run. And he doesn't actually have to kick or punch very hard. He only has to kick and punch in his mind, somatically, like feel into it enough to have the impulse, which then starts to give him new options. And that's the neuroception. Now I'm starting to see my perceived reality different. So that when I was a little boy, perhaps, and I felt frozen when mum and dad used to fight, I'm now in this experience maybe going and trying to break it up, or I'm running away, is actually healing it. So by running, it's stopping the freeze or the fawn, and it starts to then follow the impulse of running. And it's like, oh, he needed to run. So now in my mind, in my body, I'm going to run. And once that feeling has come back, it then can start going back to the rest and digest. So it's like layers out. We're trying to get, when we heal with somebody, and this is the whole thing that, I mean, bless people for wanting to try and support people on their journey, like say as like a men's coach, but it's like accountability is one thing, healing a shattered nervous system is a completely different thing. Like I'm a couple of years into my psychotherapy like study, and I'm still, like just learning. I think I'll be learning forever, but it's just noticing the difference between, say, a men's coach and a psychotherapist, and I think that's why I kind of tried to discern that a couple of months ago around it. It's not that I don't think men's work is amazing, because I'm still deeply in it. It's more that I'm trying to go, I'm venturing into new territory and giving men that have probably been in this space for a while a different experience, or going deeper, with some framework and with some maps, some deeper maps. And I sort of see that progression happening around. I'm getting a lot of men in the men's workspace now starting to reach out to ask around, what are you studying? What are you doing? And so I appreciate that, and I'm just super grateful that men are starting to see their own gaps for themselves, where it's like, oh, a little bit of NLP and some accountability isn't quite enough here. You can't just force your way to heal. If you're in that, and look, this happens all the time. Men are in their stuck or their fawn, and they just get told to, well, go to the gym. Go 4 days a week. There it is. You'll be fixed, and then they don't go, or they do, and their body doesn't respond very well, because they're still in a state of absolute terror in their body, and it needs a deeper level of understanding and help. I can train anyone. Coached people internationally for years. It's like the training isn't the thing. It's like all the other parts to them need work. And I think this is the piece around healing and men's work and all this sort of stuff. It's like there's levels, absolute levels.
I've really felt that, because where it seems like you're going is dealing with the more subtle realms that is beneath the surface. And like for me, I've been considering what mastery is in the last year. Like, what does it mean to be a master at something? Because I see myself as apprenticing to mastery, and that continued devotion to get to that stage where I can master something. I know that's years down the track, but I want to put myself on that journey to continue that path. And
I'm going to interrupt. Just Charlotte and I spoke about this morning, that mastery is a verb. And so that's why it's always the pursuit of mastery. You're never actually, a master knows he's never a master, because it's mastery, and it's just, I love words, you know me, poet and want to be philosopher. I'm not old enough yet, but it's that whole thing of I'm not a master. I'm striving for mastery.
Yeah. And that's what I feel. And when I consider mastery, there's people who I see, they go for range. I can, they're kind of jack of all trades, and it feels like they have a lot of experience. I don't necessarily see that as mastery, but the other experience is depth. And this involves a continued devotion of unearthing and going down, down, down. It's instead of going out, it's going down. And that's what I'm feeling that you're bringing to the men's workspace in this is a devotion to something more. Because I've seen that in myself. I can have big experiences and want the instant gratification of I'm healed. But no, it's a devotion. It's mastery. Like that's what I seek, is something that goes beyond just a quick fix. I want to know that I built and I build something and it then adds value. And like I hear that in what you're speaking to there, because as we clear away, the surface muck, it might be like we're just scooping across the pond and there's garbage and stuff on top, and it's easy to scoop off, and that's okay. But then we're starting to enter below the surface, and now we've got particles in the water, and it's like, oh, how do I capture these? How do I begin to clean the deeper and deeper layers? Yeah. And then we get down to the sea floor, and this is where, like, fins have actually sunk down too. Sometimes it's big shit because we're like, oh, I've done so much, and then at these deep layers, oh, there's something here I forgot about a long time ago.
Yeah, often at times for men that work with me, it's a lot of the trauma stuff is pre-verbal. And that's why I believe so deeply in somatic psychotherapy, is that it goes beyond words, and the body remembers. And, thinking about us being little boys and just how much capacity we had, and that things can be so overwhelming. And remember that overwhelm causes the fight, flight, freeze or please. And if we are little and we have little capacity, it's easy to understand that we could easily go into overwhelm. And sometimes it's just as small as things happen too fast. So sometimes when I work with a man, it's just around allowing slowness to happen. Like, that can be deeply healing. A man can feel so afraid of slowing down because he's always had to be quick because life happens so fast. It could be that, mum and dad separated and he moved, and all of a sudden he's in a new school and a new home, and he's got different clothes and the house smells different. It was just too much too soon. And so when we actually go deeper into this work, it can be just little things like pacing. And it's like that level of subtlety that it's, there's so many layers to this work. And I think you're right. It's like, yes, finding the depth and finding the nuance, but also just allowing healing to look very different to how we think the outcome is. It's like the more I get out of the way of a client's healing, the faster it happens. It's like the more I try, the worse it is at times. And again, coming back from wanting to be a coach and wanting to give people big experiences, and this is where I see the falter in men's work over time, is that, say a man comes to men's work, does a holotropic breathwork session, totally blasts himself into another dimension and meets these parts of himself. Like you say, it's a bit of the stuff on the top that was easy to get to. How does he piece himself back together? It's like knowing that you've got this power to blow people open, and do you have the ability to put them back together again? Or are they just leaving that experience totally open and not having the resources to be able to piece it back together? And this is, for me, this is why I created my mentorship recently. It was like, I want to give men the resources and at least some tools and maps so they can sort of navigate this. And if I can show them how to, then it becomes an easier process for future, that these are tools that they get to keep forever and have a better understanding, better emotional intelligence, better regulation, all these parts. So when they do go to do something like that, they're better resourced. They've got their utility belt and they're ready to go. And, also too, at the end of that, they might then want to go to work on it. Like, they might uncover some things inside of that mentorship and then go, cool, let's work one-on-one. And then we're not fishing around in the dam trying to find stuff. It's like, we know what's there. We've got it. And that feels, to me, that feels a really good use of both of our time, because I know how busy we all are.
Yeah, we want to get it done. We want to, there is that, I do desire to get there, And that can come from a healthy place of like, oh, I'm just in my feminine flow waiting for it to just happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, where's the direction taking me, and where am I aiming the ship?
Yeah, not, like for a lot of guys, they get into relationships, say, and typically that's one of the few places that men will open up. It's like often they don't have anyone else but their partner, that they can speak to or open up to. So it's like having this opportunity to not wait until people are in this rush to find the perfect relationship or be with the one. And it's like, have you done the work so when you find the one, you can keep the one? Like there's a bit of that in there for me where I'm like, I'd be wanting to do this work now. And I think that's the key concept for me when I work with men is urgent versus important. And just really getting that it's so easy to live a life of urgency and whatever's next and being almost victim to how busy I am. And it's easy to put things on the shelf that are important, and just really encouraging men to do what is important, to like really strive for that, because the urgent things will always be there, and having the sovereignty in a way to actually just go, I need to be doing, like I want to be doing this,
For me, that is like living a life of reaction versus response. Like I can react to how I'm feeling. I can react to what someone says to me. I can react to, different scenarios in my life, or I can choose to respond to them. And for me, like, especially when it comes to business or relationship or whatever it is, it actually involves taking a deeper space and time for reflection. Like I've been someone who's wanted to take the next step and be like, oh, I know the next step. I'll just take that, and then I'll take the next one, and then I'll eventually have time. But to actually pause and be like, what is the next step? Is that the right one? Is that where I want to go? And respond of like making a plan, seeing what I want, seeing what I desire. And I think this is one of the most important things we can do, is to actually pause and move from that pause. Like this podcast, it came after 4 days out in nature on my vision quest. It was like, this is the time to do it. And it was like, that is right. But I had to pause, because before that I was like, what's next? What do I do? And it's like, I need to take a step away to gain perspective, to gain insight, to gain what I truly feel called to. And that can take some time. It can take more than 4 days. It can take months.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like that part of like jumping out of the system, we call it, and it's like taking a bird's eye view of what's needed or what's next. And to me, that's like, one of the archetypes of the king. And I know the king gets talked about a lot, so I'm not going to go too deep into that, but it's my version of it is he's the seer and he's our joy, so it's like the important stuff brings a lot of joy. And that's often at times, men will push themselves so hard in their lives and forget that they're also carrying their little boy, and their little boy doesn't get to play. So, not to hold that part of you at ransom for later one day, and telling yourself that you'll get to play one day. It's just, it breaks me when I see men living lives like that, of just pushing and pushing and pushing and striving to be a great man and do all these amazing things for everyone else, and never giving themselves the permission of just rest and just play,
Oh, that feels like a powerful statement, man. I felt that one, and I can feel like, the sadness of like, if I don't let my little boy play, I've done that. Breaks his fucking heart.
Big time.
Yeah.
Like I'll do guided meditation practices with men to meet their inner child, and some of the men's inner child is just so sad at them. So mad, so sad. Like they're at that point where they're just like, they'll come out, they'll be in tears, and it's shit. He's still in that room from when he was a little boy, where he made it mean something about him, and he just hasn't had a chance since, And often in times that's when the magician comes online. Like our the first archetype is obviously the lover. It's our connection, a connection to our mother, to nourishment, to love. And then the second one that comes along is our magician, because the magician is fear. And usually in life, we're cruising along, we're living our best lives, we're completely present, we're playful, we're all the things, and fully connected to our lover, our like movement, whatever it is. We're just like in the moment, playful, and then something happens. And then in that something happens, fear is created, because all of a sudden it's like, it's not safe here. Something's wrong, something's not right, I'm not right, I am wrong, I am however it is. And the magician is also linked to the safety officer. So the safety officer kicks in and goes, you got to be different to how you are to survive, you know, which is internal family systems as well, which is you create a manager. There's pain there that's too great to be with, too overwhelming, another map. And then we create a manager of a way of being that's different to how we innately are. And the little boy gets locked away, you know. And this is the work that I do. And it can take one session or it can take a whole year.
Yeah.
You know, depends on how deep he is down in there. Yeah. But it's like bringing the wholeness back, bringing the fullness, you know, one of the core principles of Akomi, which is holism, mind-body holism. And again, the organicity, you know, mindfulness, loving presence, all the parts, you know, and it's just like, I love this work because it gives me a structure and a framework for healing. It's not just blasting a gun and hoping for the best, you know. If I take someone through a huge experience, I don't know what's going to happen for them. Whereas if we go in very slowly, mindfully, in loving presence, the subtlety can emerge, you know. And I feel like that has responsibility to it. That has, you know, the ability for the deeper things to actually emerge, you know, because it wants to. Ultimately, that's why we do this work or why we meet people and our stuff shows up. It's like it's wanting to. Life is an aggregator. It's going to bring things to the surface for you. And it's having the people or knowing where to look and where to go when that stuff comes up rather than pushing it back down.
Man, I am in deep appreciation for what you're bringing to the space right now. Because I can feel this in this conversation where it's like the invitation for myself to touch the deeper, subtle layers, to be with them, to continue that exploration. And that I love hearing and feeling you lead that charge within this space and being willing to bring that to something that I feel is in deep importance to this work. So thank you for that, man. And we're about to wrap up for the time, man. And before we do, is there anything still alive or something you want to share to bring to the space?
I actually feel really complete. I just really appreciate you. I knew I was going to get lost at some point, and that happened, so that felt really good as well. I love being in the lost and in the curiosity all at the same time. And I think just, you know, my one piece for people is keep playing.
Keep playing. I love that message, man. I know that is going to be one of the big things I take from this space, to go be with that little boy a little bit more, let him play and bring him out. Man, if anyone wanted to connect with you, if you've got anything you wanted to share, I know you said you had your men's program coming up.
Yeah, men can always reach out to me, linzeyb on Instagram or Linzey Beister on Facebook. And yeah, I run a weekly men's circle on the Gold Coast and online. So you're welcome to come along and see what the work that we do. The mentorship just kicked off, and I don't know when this is going to be released, but if you're interested in mentorship with me, I would love to have you, or at least have a conversation. And if you're a woman listening and any of this sort of resonates for your partner or a man in your life, please reach out.
Thank you all for listening. This has been The Weird Way. If you want to connect, everything is going to be in the show notes beneath. Linzey will be there. If you want to connect with him, please do. He is a beautiful man with a big heart, and you've heard him speak. And just let you know, I feel him in this work, and it's a pleasure to walk alongside you, brother. Thank you for being on.
Yeah. And Gathering of Men, I can't wait. So excited.
This is going to come out on the day we're at the Gathering of Men. So you won't hear us then, but we'll be out 150 men gathering on land, going into this work. So send us some love. We'll send you some love. Take care.